call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Directors Williams, Wolf, here. Hartman, here. Adam, here. Levanino, here. Richardson, here. Julian, Mosby, here. Clark, here. Schneider, here. Patino, here. Sierra, here. And Chair Bennett.
Here. Would you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we have a public comment period. Are there any speaker slips at this point?
I have no public comment.
Okay, and this is an opportunity for people to speak on any item that's not on today's agenda within the purview of SBCAG. Okay, seeing none, move on to the approval of the consent calendar. I understand that you need to pull.
No,
You're going to be pulling item 4G, is that correct? And what we'll do is to make it easy, unless anyone has any other item they wish to pull, then what we're going to do is we're going to approve all items under the consent calendar except G and allow Supervisor Adams to exit. So if there's a motion for approval from A through F, there's been a motion made and second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Supervisor Adam? Now would be appropriate to make a motion to approve item G under 4G.
Mr. Chair, I need to read it into the record.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. 4G, Highway 166 Black Road intersection improvements. 4G1, approve and authorize the chair of the SBCAG board to sign a contract with SOMAS for up to and not to exceed $382,000, including $34,575 on contingency work from Measure A funding to complete final design and right-of-way engineering and some final environmental work on the Highway 166 Black Road intersection improvement project. 4G2, approve and authorize the executive director to approve contingency work up to $34,575, included in the total contract value of $382,000. 4G3, approve and authorize the executive director to extend the time of performance in accordance with section 4.B of the contract with SOMAS. 4G4, approve and authorize the chair of the SBCAG board to sign a cooperative agreement with Caltrans for the final design and right-of-way phase of the Highway 166 Black Road intersection improvement project.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just for the record, Supervisor Adam is recusing himself in this item due to a property interest that his family owns near Highway 166.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is this prior to the actual design configuration of the intersection final configuration?
I'm not the person that's going to answer that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Director Richardson. So the question, as I understand it, was related to how this relates to the design of the overall intersection?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah, so at the North County Sub-Regional Committee, we provided an update indicating that the project development team had selected or identified the traffic signal alternative for detailed design, and so that's what we're pursuing with the funds that this board is considering to approve.
Has Caltrans agreed to the signal intersection?
Yes, they're part of the project development team.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Motion would be in order.
Yeah, if there's no public comment, Mr. Chair, I'll move this item.
I'll second.
Motion to made and second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carried. Madam Clerk.
Item 5, Draft 2018 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. Review and comment on the 2018 Draft Regional Transportation Improvement Program programming proposal for submittal to the California Transportation Commission, CTC.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Morning, Mr. Chair, directors. Nice to see all of you. Today, SBCAG staff has good news for the board related to the State Transportation Improvement Program. Per the passage of SB1 by the governor earlier this year, the fund source for the State Transportation Improvement Program, or the price-based excise tax, is now being stabilized. In the 2016 STIP, as you're probably aware, we had some challenges with the STIP, which led to very heavy cuts, and as well as...
I'm going to interrupt you just for a sec, because I've been advised to recuse myself, so I'll just have to be watching on the audience. We still, for most of the agenda today, because we have not yet received communication back from the FPPC as to which part of the project, because I live in proximity to 5A, or to the A project.
Okay, thank you for that.
You ran from Carpinteria.
Okay. So what happened with the 2016 STIP was we had to face major deletions and delays as a result of the price-based excise tax and the revenue source for the STIP. With the passage of SB1, the price-based excise tax is stabilized again, which is leading to additional revenues for the State Transportation Improvement Program. As such, SBCAG as a regional agency must develop and submit a regional transportation improvement program to the California Transportation Commission. This RTIP, or regional program, identifies how SBCAG plans on spending our share of gas tax funding. For the 5-year period, fiscal years 18-19 to 22-23, we have identified our available funding for programming, and so that is included in the staff report. The SBCAG region did have a prior balance of $3.7 million that's available for programming from prior projects. The good news is we now have an additional $17 million available for programming, which leads us to about $21 million. What SBCAG staff is proposing with the draft RTIP is that, as I mentioned with the 2016 STIP, staff is recommending that we program $2.1 million to the City of Goleta Equal Fowler project, which faced deletions last time, so we would restore those cuts. We also recommend programming a certain amount of $840,000 to PPM, or Project Program Monitoring, for STIP projects, which the SBCAG staff uses to help deliver regional projects. And then the balance is $17.7 million available for US 101 HOV widening project. The board policy is that any STIP revenues that come in be programmed to completion of the project. So that is what staff is recommending with our share of regional funding through the STIP. So that is the proposal for our RTIP programming. We do also have good news from San Joaquin County. We did an exchange in 2012 with San Joaquin County of Proposition 1B funding, and they gave us a dollar-for-dollar amount back, which under the 2016 STIP unfortunately had to be deleted, but as I said, they also have a balance. And so they are recommending to their board that they reprogram the $8.9 million back to US 101 HOV. So that is going to their board also. And then finally, the State Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, also receives their share of STIP funding, 25% of funding. And they are recommending that in addition to the $2 million that we previously had programmed for US 101 HOV widening, that $3 million that was cut from the 2016 STIP also be restored. So that would be a total of $5 million for US 101 HOV. So in summary, last time was pretty brutal, but this time around with SP1, there is additional funding available for programming, and today we're presenting the draft RTIP. We did present it to TTAC earlier this month, and they had no comments. We will come back to your board next month in TTAC with the final RTIP before we submit it to the CTC, which will then take all the regional tips as well as the Caltrans I-tip and have the State Transportation Improvement Program for approval in March. With that, I'll conclude my presentation and be happy to take any questions.
Any questions of staff?
Oh, Sarkis, just in recapping all of this, is there anything, so were all of these, what do I want to call them, restorations? So we're not approving anything that wasn't previously restored?
The only, the restorations are for City of Goleta's Equal Fowler.
Right.
Restoration of San Joaquin COG, $9 million for 101 HOV, and restoration of $3 million from Caltrans from the interregional program.
What about the 166 West as well?
The 166 West, right now we haven't identified a project, so we didn't really have it programmed.
Future programming.
Yes, future programming. So when we have a project identified, we will be able to use shares for that project.
Okay, great.
Director Schneider.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my memory back on the San Joaquin piece. I remember it was Prop 1B, and we moved money around, and it worked because projects were ready or not ready at that point in time. But I'm also remembering that I thought the money for 1B had to do with rail, and so I know when you said the 101 HOV project, I don't know if that's also incorporating the rail component. If you can remind me what that was all about.
I'll keep it high level. The exchange, the money was intended for improvements in the corridor, and so at the time there was money set aside for rail. When we were programming the money in the RTIP, in San Joaquin's RTIP, the money was programmed to 101 HOV as a related improvement in the corridor. So that's why the money is programmed to 101 HOV.
So did we lose money in that exchange that was supposed to go to rail, and we're not putting it back into rail, or what? I'm still kind of...
My understanding is we did not lose money for rail. It was just the reprogramming. So I'll defer to Director Kern.
My understanding is that when we programmed it in San Joaquin Regional Transportation Improvement Program, it was programmed to the Highway 101 project because that was the only project that was ready to go. So when we traded it to them, that was the purpose. So yes, the original intent of the money that we gave to San Joaquin was rail related, and they were able to use it on a rail project. The money that we traded with them was STIP money that was allocated to 101.
So we gave rail money for here to go to a rail project there.
Correct.
Which means we've lost rail money here.
But we didn't have a project to implement.
Understood, but
yeah.
That's okay. I guess my impression from before was that when we got the money back, we wouldn't lose funding that would go towards the train on the 101. So yeah. I didn't look back at the old staff reports or anything like that, but
yeah, it's basically STIP capacity. So with the fact that we have a project that's ready to go that can use the money, we can make the decision to program future money for rail if we had a project to program, and it would be up to this board to do so.
Okay.
So it would be my recommendation. And again, this is an information only item today, so it's not an action item. Using the money and obligating it to a project is probably pretty dang important, because when you do have those STIP reductions, if you have like a reserve, those are the first to go. So if you're not using your money and you're not applying it to specific projects, then it's at risk. So I would recommend using it as efficiently as possible and continuing with this programming that we're recommending. And then if we had a rail project that was eligible, we can make those decisions in the future.
Okay, well, I appreciate this is not for action. That's why I wanted to bring it up now. So I would just ask staff to just kind of look at what exactly we did back then, because I remember it being complicated. and I know Mr. Kemp had his way of explaining it that don't ask me how to repeat it, but it made sense then, and I'm just trying to remember it. But then also, certainly by the time it gets back to us for an action item, especially if we're looking at the retiming with Amtrak and so forth, there may be something ready to go by the time this comes back, or not. The new rail cars, I guess my question is if you could, or my request would be to review that and look into what could be available for rail as opposed to just keeping it in reserve like you're saying, but to at least review that. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on that, I want to clarify, was that money that was designated by Measure A voters to go to rail? And if so, how does it get back?
No.
It was the money that you're referring to, the $8.9 million, was not from Measure A. It was from a Proposition 1B program. So it was not colored as Measure A. It was coming from the state, Proposition 1B.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, next item.
Item 6, Senate Bill 1, State Funding Strategy for US 101 High Occupancy Vehicle Lane and Parallel Projects. 6A, receive presentation on status of US 101 HOV and parallel projects and funding strategy for US 101 HOV and parallel projects for Cycle 1 of the Senate Bill 1 state funding programs. 6B, authorize submittal of grant applications for Cycle 1 of Senate Bill 1 Local Partnership Program Solutions for Congested Corridors Program and Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. 6C, approve programming of SB1 Local Partnership Program formula funding for Santa Barbara region for US 101 HOV project and parallel projects up for construction.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is an exciting day for me. I think this is, when I first took the job and you were asking me about how to implement 101, and I said, well, it's a tough one. It was overcome by the passage of SB1 and these opportunities that are before us today. So I see a light at the end of the tunnel to get this, this project to fruition, and this is the beginning. So with that, we wanted to share a few things that we created over the last couple weeks. We created a video on our Linden Casitas project and the progress being made today. And we also, and then we'll move on to other exciting little products that we have. So we'll start with the video. Thank you.
The Linden Casitas Interchanges project is the third phase of 4 planned phases to widen US 101 HOV from Ventura County to Santa Barbara County. When complete, there will be 16 miles of new carpool lane that will be available to residents and travelers in the corridor, and will provide wider freeway as well as new commuter rail service in the peak hours, as well as expanded interregional bus service and additional ride-sharing options for commuters. Currently, there are about 15,000 commuters who travel the corridor from Ventura County to South Santa Barbara County on a daily basis, and we're looking at ways of relieving congestion while providing commuters with a new option. Caltrans recently flew a drone over the project site, which is offering a new perspective for seeing how the project is progressing. And previously, we were only able to show pictures or road footage of the project, but now with the drone, we're providing a new perspective for the public. In terms of roadway side of things, the project is allowing for the reconstruction of both bridges over US 101 at Linden Casitas Pass Road. There's a new bridge at Villa Real over the Carpinteria Creek, and the 101 freeway itself will be widened to 3 lanes and raised to allow for increased stormwater flow to roof flooding in Carpinteria. The project construction is very complex, and what they're doing is keeping all lanes of Highway 101 open during construction. So for instance, on the bridges, they're able to construct one half of the bridge and allow freeway to keep flowing, and then they'll be able to complete the other half of the bridge. All the construction material at the project site will be recycled and reused. The trees that have been removed and other organic materials at the site will be used for stormwater prevention, and the demolished concrete is actually being used as base material for future sections of the project. We've had a great working relationship with Caltrans, especially the engineers on the project, with the construction, and that includes project managers Jason Klein and Ray Barajas. They've been great to work with and have made sure that the project is staying on schedule and under budget.
add to that is not only is it on schedule and under budget, it's actually being accelerated. The original proposal was to finish construction in 2020. Caltrans has identified an opportunity working with our contractor to accelerate that by 1 year. So this project will be done under budget and early. Have you ever heard that, Peter? Okay. So congratulations to Caltrans and the management of this project. It's going very well, and it's pretty exciting. It also helps sets the stage for the next phases. The fact that this is going so well, we have such a strong working relationship, bodes well for future funding. So with that, I'm going to also turn it over to Greg, and he's going to talk about our new website that's been updated for the Highway 101 projects.
Excuse me, we have a comment, Director Adams.
Yeah, I just want to challenge you to a bet publicly. $5.
Okay.
It doesn't come in before budget, under budget, or on time.
Okay, I'll
Only
take that
$5
bet.
though.
Okay, I'll take that bet. I'll take that bet.
Or a burrito. I'll buy you a burrito.
Okay.
Can we all get on that bet? Is that
up to 3?
Okay. I just want to step back a minute to talk about the video, because we're really proud about that. It was an in-house effort, entirely SBCAG staff done. We want to thank Caltrans for giving us that wonderful drone footage. That was kind of the inspiration for the ideas, to give people a new perspective on the project. But Kent Epperson from Traffic Solutions was the director and producer of the video. As you saw, Sarkis Kacek was our narrator, and mellifluous tones in the narration of that. And other staff, SBCAG staff members popped up throughout the video, but we're really proud of that. It's going to be something that you'll see on our website, and we'll be pushing it out through social media and email links as well to give, and we'll use it for public presentations. We're going to be talking to the Rotary Club with Chair Bennett's organization and bringing this video as well. And this other tool that we have, a brand new website for SB Roads, is another huge public information tool that we're going to use to help spread the word about what's going on with the 101 HOV freeway widening. We have this very fresh, clean look on the website. It's very modern and has a tremendous amount of information on the site. It's also mobile app capable too. So just clicking on the first thing, you pull up the widening projects, and there's the map that we're also very familiar with, the 4 phases, and each of the individual phases has their own clickable link. So if you click on the first phase, there's bullet point information about that, pictures too embedded in the website. Phase 2 is also described, and phase 3, and then phase 4 has even more information. You've got the different phases, their own separate maps for each one. People can really dig in and look carefully. For some reason that's not going on. It's because it's already on. Phase B, 4B, 4C, and 4D and E. There's specific information about the lane and train solution. So we've got information, and that will increase in its density and detail as we have more information available. There's background information about the project in total. And then there's also information about commute options, which is Traffic Solutions' website. So we have a portal on every page of the website that goes to Traffic Solutions, where they have their Smart Ride website. Provides information to folks who are interested in finding alternative transportation options in the South Coast. Has a list of all of their programs. You can put in your start destination or your starting point and your destination and figure out ways to get around town. There's information about Cyclemania and other things that employers can offer their employees to provide commute options. So it's a full service website, as you can see. It has a lot of information about the project, and it's just another tool that we'll be using, interacting with the public to keep people up to date as to exactly where the status of the 101 HOV project is. So with that, I'll turn it back to Margie.
Okay, now we'll get to the real item. Agenda item number 6. We're going to talk about, once we get there.
Let's see here.
Technology always lags behind a little bit.
That's right, there you go. And then back to there.
Okay, here we are. Okay, the funding strategy for the US 101 and parallel projects. was a team effort. We met with the staff on several occasions to develop our strategy and what we're proposing here. And what we're proposing is very ambitious. We're asking for a lot of money, but this is the time to ask for it because there's a lot of folks that are still gathering their data and getting their projects ready. And fortunately, we're ready to go. So we're going to take advantage of those opportunities. So the purpose of the presentation, we're going to do a tag team thing today. All of us are going to participate because we are such a good team. We're going to talk about the HOV lane projects and the parallel projects and the status of each one of those, all the new funding opportunities that are before us and what we're going to take advantage of. And ultimately, our funding strategy is a recommendation that's been unanimously recommended by all the committees that we've presented this to. So again, like we've been talking about, our projects are ready to go. We've been talking with our state partners. This is a high priority for Sacramento. We've talked, like I mentioned in my Friday update, we met with the Secretary of Transportation, Cal SDA last week, and advocating for our project. They know what we're doing. They know what it's all about. The California Transportation Commission staff is helping us advocate for our project as much as they can because they're the decision makers or make the recommendation to the CTC. So this is a funding opportunity that we're not going to pass up. Our strong partnership with Caltrans is instrumental. We're going to be submitting a joint application with them, and so the funding strategy is what we're going to be talking about. So with that, I'm going to pass it on. To talk about the phases, I'm going to pass it on to Fred, right? Or Sarkis? Fred, okay. And he will get into the details of the projects, and I'll sit down and answer any questions later if you have anything for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Margie. So again, good morning. So my job today is to give you a little background on the progress that we've made on the Highway 101. And as Greg alluded to earlier, you've seen this map before. And Phase 1 was completed in 2012. And that was kind of the initial 2-mile section between Santa Barbara and Montecito. And we continue to build upon that with completing Phase 2, which was between Muscle Shoals and the city of Carpinteria. That was 6 miles of HOV lanes, the first HOV lanes in Santa Barbara County. And now you saw the video footage of the Linda Casitas project, and that's been underway for a little over a year in construction. As Margie noted, there's already been cooperation to the highest degree to try to get that done a year early, and so we're working towards that end. And then the last project is Phase 4. That's the remaining approximately 10 miles of HOV widening between Carpinteria and Santa Barbara. That extends from Baylord Avenue to Sycamore Creek, and it really, you can see by the map, it overlaps with all the other phases because there is work that was that's needed to make those conforms in the different communities. And then so this map was created to bring to the board back in March when we were bringing the corridor advisor recommendations on an implementation strategy for the Phase 4 project. We broke up the project into 5 individual segments, A through E, from the south to the north. And at that time, we presented a recommendation to identify Phase 4A in the city of Carpinteria as the highest priority for design, right-of-way, permitting, and construction, and then continue to move forward with the design efforts and permitting for phases 4, B, and C. That was in March, and at the time, we had come up with 2 key elements. We had refined the scope based on board's direction to integrate elements of the rehabilitation project, safety and operational improvements throughout the corridor, and those were integrated into the decision point documents, and we came up with a revised cost estimate for that project, the overall project. And so the next step was developing this funding plan, and that was one key component, identifying the scope, determining the cost, but then we had to find out what are the reasonable funding options to fund this project. We had Measure A, we had STIP funding that was committed by board policy. In April, as was mentioned previously, the state passed SB1, and that was really a game changer for how we move forward with this. And we started working with possible funding sources, working at a committee level, working at a staff level, working with Caltrans, bringing TTAC members involved in that, and you'll hear more about that involvement further in the presentation. As to what the funding package would be to deliver the overall A through C as the first priority, but the whole corridor, 10 miles through E, based on future funding cycles. And so throughout the summer, we've been very busy, as has been noted, working at a number of different levels. Director Kern and others, Mr. Eads here, and Sarkis Kacek attended a meeting up in Sacramento earlier and this summer, and to talk about our funding package and our project. And this brochure that you've seen before was handed out to talk about how we would approach this based on the SB1 funding programs. Then we started to get into really the details as those programs were being developed and the guidelines and the eligibility requirements, and we started preparing that funding plan for segments 4A through C as a first priority, and then also for D and E. The results of that have shown that we're able to use SHOP funding that Caltrans has committed earlier this summer for project development, and then they're on what's called a contingency status for a future SHOP program in 2018 where they can get construction funding for segments 4A through C, coupled with SB1 funding, and we're able to pretty much reduce a lot of our Measure A contribution in those initial segments and reserve that for the latter segments of the corridor. We're able to use the Measure A funding as a match contribution for the SB1 funding, and so that's kind of our current strategy right now. This slide shows you that kind of the funding composition of the current approach for segments 4A through C. We're targeting delivery for the first years of the funding available under SB1 through fiscal year 2021. So that means that, segment 4A would be delivered in 2019, but then we're moving faster, so we had to actually look at how to deliver in advance segments 4B and C 1 to 2 years early to meet this funding opportunity, as Director Kern had mentioned. Caltrans did, like I mentioned before, Caltrans secured project development funding under the SHOP up to $182 million. And then they also are on that contingency status I mentioned for construction capital. In total, that's $182 million. Should clarify that. And then we've programmed, as Mr. Kacek mentioned earlier, as part of the RTIP item, our current county shares of state gas tax for this project in this current cycle, and then for future cycles until the project is going to be completed. And Measure A is being used as a match. So you can see our funding plan shows that with SB1 and SHOP funding, they're contributing over 3/4 of the funding for segments 4A through C. And then Measure A, 14%, our state gas tax shares, and Caltrans contribution through the interregional, about 7%. And then the remaining is 2% for really the parallel projects where it comes from grants or active transportation program. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Sarkis, and he'll talk more about the SB1 funding programs.
Morning again. I think you sense Director Kern's excitement with the opportunities that we have, and so I think for me it's equally exciting, and I just wanted to show you this really fun big binder that we have that we've been working on with SB1. So SB1 is providing $5.2 billion per year for transportation in California. While I'm going to be focusing on the 3 programs, I just want to take a second to mention that SB1 does provide additional money for Caltrans with the SHOP. It's also providing additional money to local agencies for streets and roads, as well as for active transportation and bus transit. So while we've been focusing on these programs, I just wanted to mention that there were other programs under SB1. The 3 new programs are highlighted in the PowerPoint. There you can see the SB1 logo that the state has produced. The 3 programs that we're targeting are the Local Partnership Program, which is a flexible program which provides funding for regions and local agencies that have sales tax measures or regional development impact fees. The The second program is the Solutions Congested Corridors Program. This is meant to be a very large transformative program to help relieve congestion on corridors throughout the state. You hear about congestion happening in the Bay Area and Los Angeles. One thing that we've been also mentioning at statewide meetings is that we also have congestion in our region, even though we're a smaller region. And then the final program is the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. This is a new freight program, which is meant to provide improvements on heavy freight corridors. It's any projects that are similar to priorities in the California Freight Plan, as well as those in our Central Coast Freight Strategy. So for us, fortunately, we are a priority project in terms of freight in the state. For Cycle 1, the CTC has been holding a series of workshops throughout the state, which SBCAG staff has been attending to develop guidelines for Cycle 1. The good news is that for Cycle 1, they're looking to infuse a large amount of money into the state. About $2.8 billion will be available in Cycle 1. So this creates a great opportunity for us with our large ask to not be modest about our ask. And then, as Fred mentioned, we did have a TTAC subcommittee, which we formed in August. This includes representatives from the South Coast agencies, as well as a representative from the county and from City of Santa Maria. And so we worked with them, we rolled up our sleeves, we sharpened our pencils, we looked at what the needs were for US 101, and then we looked at the opportunities under SB1. Next, I guess I'll do that. There we go. This slide provides a little bit more detail on the 3 programs that we're targeting. As I mentioned, $2.8 billion is available. Local partnership rewards self-help counties as well as local agencies with their own fees. Cycle 1 provides $300 million available for a 3-year program under competitive. The program also provides $200 million in formula funding to those agencies that have sales tax measures. They're doing a 2-year program for this one. For us, we're estimating that we're going to get about $1 million per year for being a self-help county. Through the life of Measure A, that's about $22 million. If we weren't a self-help county, we wouldn't be getting any of this money. So I wanted to highlight that. Since this is a new program and we do have needs, SBCAG staff is recommending, with support from the TTAC subcommittee as well as from TTAC, that revenues from this program be programmed towards US 101 HOV and the parallel projects until those projects are completed. So that's one recommendation that we have for the board today. The second program is the congested corridors. This is a big one, about $1 billion for a 4-year program. And so for our project, we line up very well for phases 4A through C with the $1 billion available. The really good news about this program is that we're looking to partner with Caltrans on submitting the application for this program. What that means for us is that we are then a priority among all the other projects that get submitted throughout the state. Mind you, there are other projects that Caltrans will co-partner on, but it's going to be a limited amount, so that gives us an edge. Why are we competitive? Again, we have a corridor plan. Back when we did 101 in Motion, which got adopted in 2006, 2-year program where we reached out to the community to develop a multimodal plan. This also gives us an edge because a lot of regions throughout the state don't have a multimodal corridor plan. So completing that plan was really beneficial. We are also leveraging our STIP funds as well as Measure A funds, and the project is ready. The CTC is looking to program funds to projects that are ready to deliver to demonstrate to the public the needs that we have under SB1. And then the last program is the Trade Corridors Program, also a huge infusion of money, $1.3 billion for a 3-year program. This does include some federal funds, but it's a lot of state SB1 money. Good news under this pot is that they developed it similar to the Prop 1B freight program, where there were certain regional corridors. Under Prop 1B, we didn't have a Central Coast corridor, but under SB1, we've been working with the Central Coast Coalition and advocating with the CTC that we have our own dedicated corridor, which means we have our own dedicated set aside of money. So of the 60% that's available to all regions throughout the state for regional corridors, we actually have a $16 million target for this cycle 1, which we've been working with the Central Coast Coalition, and we are getting support from the coalition that we will be a priority project under the Central Coast Corridor. So we're still working with them on their other projects that they have, but we should be seeing a large amount of money from this pot. Also, we're looking to partner with Caltrans on this application because they have their own dedicated 40% pot under the freight program. So if we're a co-applicant with Caltrans on this, then that means that we're also available to tap into that program. So overall, like Director Kern said, we're ready, we're leveraging funds, and we have a partnership with Caltrans, which is going to help us out a lot.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on that. Can you go back to that for a second, please? So cycle 1 is just the first year? Because I thought you said there was like the $1 billion was over 4 years.
Each program has their own different programming cycle. The longest cycle is 4 years. The shortest cycle is 2 years. So it depends on program.
Okay. And that, so is the 5.2 also indexed to the, because it's the gas tax, correct?
It is. It's gas tax, and it's also a fee on vehicles, and so it depends on how they collect the revenues. But it's about $5.2 billion per year. It is indexed, though.
It is indexed. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. All right. To the next slide. This is probably the slide you've been waiting for, but it's our cycle 1 ask. As I mentioned, with the large infusion of funds available through the 3 programs, we are not being modest. We have a large need, and we have a project that's ready. So our ask is $185 million total. The framework for our application is listed in the PowerPoint. We are looking to request funding for phases 4A along with parallel projects, 4B along with parallel projects, 4C and parallel projects. And we're also looking to potentially apply for bus improvements. The programs, the freight program is focused on freight improvements. Local partnership and congested corridors have very flexible and broad project eligibility. The reason why we're including bus improvements is for the congested corridors program to provide a multimodal aspect to our ask. So while we have our 101 HOV project, we also have bike ped, and we will also have bus improvements. So we will be looking to work with either the Vista VCTC, Ventura County, or Santa Barbara MTD to acquire some electric vehicles to reduce emissions in the corridor. The one thing, and I failed to mention under the congested corridors program, and what I want to highlight is that the only expansion on the state highway system that's eligible under congested corridors is either managed lanes, toll lanes, or HOV lanes like our HOV project. So that's another benefit for us. Next slide, please. I've already mentioned a lot of these bullet points, so I won't go over them, but we will look to be competitive for cycle 1. The timing is segments 4A and the parallel projects. We are also going to be very aggressive with cycle 2 and any additional future cycles of SB1. We have, for a region of our size, we actually have pretty good stature when it comes to these CTC programs. I think a lot of you are familiar with a lot of the projects you've been getting through the Active Transportation Program. We are very engaged in terms of the guidelines process, and we've developed very good relationships with CTC staff. And the project has been on their radar, and so we are going to be very aggressive with our ask.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
You know, I just have a question on this cycle 1 funding that you're including the parallel projects. Because I know that we've started that process between the county and the city, but what are we asking for as far as the actual monetary amount? Because I don't recall this board getting a full explanation of the project costs, the timing of the implementation of the parallel projects. So if someone is looking at this grant and they're evaluating the 101, which we know is ready to go and shovel ready, as you might say, I don't think the parallel project piece is. Now, I could be wrong. My question is, does including the parallel projects, does that somehow make our request not as positive, that it might degrade it?
For cycle one, the parallel project would be Santa Claus Lane and any other improvements within 4A, 4B, and 4C. Obviously, we know that there are other parallel projects down the path, but for cycle one, based on the time period. And then for the congested corridors program, since it is a bike ped improvement and enhancement, it does help us with the multimodal aspect of the application.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I've never considered the Santa Claus Lane, though, as a parallel project. I've always considered that as part of our the 101 project. What I've always thought of as a parallel projects were the roundabouts and the issues on San Ysidro and Olive Mill. So it might be good, Margie, to maybe provide the board with an explanation on an update on parallel projects and the cost, because again, if you're including Santa Claus Lane, that was I never would have considered that as a parallel project.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I too have a question in regards to that. There in the staff reports, there were references to parallel projects and then to mitigations. And I would agree with Supervisor Wolf that my understanding is that the extension of the path from Rincon was a required mitigation, as was Santa Claus a required mitigation as a part of the widening of the 101. And then the parallel projects were not a part of the 101, were in fact the two roundabouts and the railroad overpass. And we agreed to process those on a parallel track. That's why they were defined as parallel projects. So I too am a little confused when we seem to mix descriptions on this as an issue. And my last comment is in SB1, there, as I recall, there's a rail component as well. And are we going to do anything in asking for any funding in regards to that?
Defer to Director
The rail that we're working on is for the retiming that's happening in April, so that's actually going to be done before this funding cycle will even complete. This is a capital improvement program, so it needs to be a capital improvement, so we will identify those needs as we go, and actually LoSAN would be the lead agency on some of those type of projects, not SBCAG. As far as the parallel and the mitigation projects, I would agree with you that we're probably mixing the terms. We're trying to just keep it as simple as possible. But yes, those projects that are required for mitigation are included in the 101 definition of the 101 project. And those additional projects that may be required under the coastal permit or what have you are what we're referring to as parallel projects. So for simplicity, we kind of lumped them all together, but it is confusing. So we will give an update on all the projects that are not mainline 101, just so we can have a discussion of that at a future meeting, just so you're aware of what's going on in the schedules and the cost and that we're looking at. But this is an opportunity to get most of that done. And so that's what we're going for. And then I think when we originally proposed this presentation, I was working with the chair to do a special study session. So we felt it may not be necessary at this point, but it may be necessary when we figure out our funding request and how it's received. And if we don't get what we asked for, then we may have to have a little more difficult discussion on, okay, now what do we do? To keep this project moving and funding forward, and we may have to delay some things to the next cycle, and making those policy level decisions will be up to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. With with cycle one, there are 2 deadlines that we need to look at in terms of submitting applications. The first the earliest deadline actually is December 15th for local partnership formula funding. The freight program and the local partnership competitive programs have applications due January 30th, and then congested corridors is February 16th. So we're actually going to be developing multiple applications. With that, SBCAG staff is recommending, and TTAC is supporting, that we hire a grant writing firm to help develop the applications. We did receive statements of qualifications from 3 firms, and we're recommending that the board approve up to $50,000 for development of applications, and the firm would be Kimley Horn. They have received successful grants through the Federal Tiger Program as well as through other state programs. And so we're recommending the use of funds for development of applications. We will also be able to use these applications developed from SP1 for future federal and state grant programs. So next steps, we are going to hit the ground running with these applications. As I mentioned, the deadlines, they're coming up really quickly, and we want to make sure that we're presenting US 101, HOV, and our parallel projects in the best light to the CTC. The applications are due in January and February. Then the CTC will be reviewing applications based on the scoring criteria, and they will come out with their recommendations in late April. We're crossing our fingers. We are part of the state recommendations in late April, because then at the May CTC meeting in San Diego is when they will be adopting the programs for all 3. And then we will be funding the projects and continuing work with Caltrans on, and our local agencies on, getting the US 101 HOV and the parallel projects delivered. So for today, this is included in the staff report. This is the TTAC and staff recommendations from the board, is to receive the presentation on the 101 and the parallel projects, as well as the funding strategy. Item B is to authorize submittal of the applications to the California Transportation Commission for the 3 programs. And then we, as I mentioned previously, we are also recommending that the local partnership formula funding be programmed to 101 HOV and the parallel projects through construction. That concludes our presentation. As Director Kern mentioned, we're very excited by the opportunity, and we'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions of staff? Director Schneider.
Thank you. Was the grant writer 50K part of this recommendation too, or is that coming back to us?
This is actually part of item, I think, 8.
Oh, is that part of, okay,
yes.
That's the, all right, so you're just.
It's a subsequent, yes.
Subsequent, okay, got that. Just a couple things. First, the rail component, you're correct, I agree that the LoSAN should be the one submitting funds from SB1 for some of the things. I do know through LoSAN that the request for certain capital enhancements, the rail cars and so forth, we received half of what we asked, and so it'd be good to get the other half. So in terms of your workload in partnering with LoSAN, and I'm sure that in VCTC and others in working on that, I hope we can do that, because that would be good to get the full funding there. So just to clarify too about the grant application and the parallel projects for, I know this is for the first phase A, B, and C, and then the second one D and E. Is it one application? I mean, there are different components of, you know, what you're applying for, but is the parallel project like its own separate grant, or is it part of the bigger picture? And that would be for both phase 1 and phase 2.
Chair and Director Schneider, it is one application. Okay. We're including all components within one application.
Okay. And then finally, I guess the big question for me, because we've heard that everything's ready, what's the technical term of being ready?
I
mean, I know it's called shovel ready, but what do we have to show to CTC
so
to
the
show
CTC
that this is...
has, depending on the program, they have programming years on when the money will be available. So when they program the money to a project, within that year, we have to go to the CTC and ask for an allocation or a vote for approval to proceed with the project.
Right. And to show that we're ready, what do we have to prove? Like what, how
When
long
we
a process?
submit our application, we will be showing that in fiscal year, say 1920, our HOV project will be ready to come in 1920 to ask for an allocation and then to start construction.
Okay. Because one thing I know we don't know the answer to yet, and it's been pending, is the release of the final or the recertified EIR process for phase 4. So where are, because that hasn't been finalized yet, and to me, you need the environmental to be finalized, right, in order to be ready.
Yes.
So, and maybe this is a question for Caltrans about what the status is on that.
Chair Bennett. Yeah. Mayor Schneider. So first of all, I'm Scott Eads. I'm the corridor manager for 101 here for Tim Gubbins today. And the status of the revised environmental document. We released a draft environmental document last December, received comments. We've been working on those. Obviously, legal and environmental and others have been working very closely on that. We recently released the responses to the comments to each of the public agencies, and we intend to certify the revised environmental document very shortly. So we're hopeful that we can move through this process quickly, which is one of the key components. We need to be through the environmental process to be able to be a good candidate for the California Transportation.
And then after that, does that need to go back to Judge Anderley to put a bow on it, or what's that process?
I believe that that's the case, yes.
And when do we, so let's say you certify in the next month, 6 weeks or whatever, what's?
It would happen, yeah, around the same time or quickly, shortly
It would happen
after.
at the same, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it would happen shortly after, essentially our job is to certify, get it back to a revised EIR, finalize that work product, and then I'm not the expert on that, that's our legal folks, but some way they communicate back to the judge and make sure that the judge is comfortable with that work product.
Okay, but and hopefully it would all go well, but we don't know what that process will look like it just yet.
We just don't know, right?
Okay, I mean, I understand the timeline that you need to go and put the work project in. I'm a little concerned that we're not having that tied up and there's a judgment that needs to occur beyond our scope and what we're able to do here. And so if there's a delay, what does that mean in terms of, with the judgment or anything like that? Can you still submit the application?
Yes, the fact that we're not asking for the money until the later in the fiscal year, all these things would need to be the environmental certified, the right-of-way certified, and the design basically ready to go out to bid. So those are the 3 things we need prior to requesting the allocation of money. I know these are technical terms, but so you get the programming first, and that's what's happening now, and then depending on which year you're awarded the funds, then you move on to the next phase of requesting allocation. We'd have to have all 3 of those things done prior to the allocation.
Okay. I do know the City of Santa Barbara staff received a very long, big document. Thank you for, I guess, no, thank you, for responding to our comments. And I haven't really gotten the full analysis yet from city staff about what that all means for us. So I'm a little feeling like I'm not quite sure if we're ready. I think a lot of the part A, B, and C, that's totally separate, even though it's one big project. So, I know I'm going to need to go back to my staff and our council about, what are the responses and what's the direction of my council. So, for now, I think I'm going to abstain from this vote just to because I need to go back to my council about those particular comments. Hopefully it will all work out, but I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
I just had an additional question. We submitted, or the state submitted a set of projects, including the 101 widening, to the federal government, and I just wondered how that might or might not fit into this, what the timing of that was.
Chair and Director Hartman, that list was related to soliciting from the states what high priority projects were in case there was an infrastructure package that became available. So it's a separate process that's being handled by the Federal Department of Transportation, with obviously the good news is that we're a priority project from California. So while there's still discussion of an infrastructure package, there are also competitive opportunities through the federal government. And so we actually submitted a federal Tiger application this past Monday to federal DOT, and we actually did mention in the application that we were a high priority from California. So I don't know how much that helps us really in the end, but we did make sure to highlight that in the federal grant.
Okay, thank you. It's back to the board. There's two items that need approval, 6B and 6C. If there's not any further discussion, then a motion would be in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion and thank staff for moving these items forward. This is critical time for us. We always talk about taking advantage of funding that may or may not be available. This is available, and I think our grant process is going to be extremely important. So thank you and the Caltrans working with us as partners. And so I will move those two items.
Okay, is there a second to that? Second. Before we move on, I don't have any speaker slips in front of me, but I should ask in the audience if there's anyone that wishes to speak on this item. And I don't see anyone, so we're ready to vote on this. We have a motion made and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? So carried.
One abstention, thank you.
Oh, okay. And that's on both items you abstained?
Abstaining for the same reasons Director Schneider indicated, potential unresolved environmental impacts on the intersections in Carpinteria.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification. Madam Clerk.
Item 7, fiscal year 17-18 overall work program and budget amendments. 7A, adopt a resolution 17-35 amending the fiscal year 2017-18 overall work program and budget to amend the US 101 local project support work element to reflect support services at Santa Claus Lane and to amend LTA program and project delivery Measure A work element to secure grant writing services for Senate Bill 1 competitive programs for the US 101 HOV project and related parallel projects. 7B, approve and authorize Executive Director Margie Kern to execute these amendments to the OWP and budget. 7C, authorize SBCAG Executive Director to enter into contract with Kimley Horn Consultants for up to $50,000 in Measure A funding to develop Cycle 1 competitive grants for SB1 programs.
Good morning again. So as we mentioned under the prior item, we do have some recommendations related to hiring a grant writer to help us with development of the SB1 applications. And so today we are presenting an amendment to the overall work program and to the budget to reflect these changes. So for the grant writing services, we are recommending that $50,000 in Measure A funds be used to hire Kimley Horn with the development of applications. To clarify, the $50,000 is coming from the US 101 HOV component. It's not coming from the broader Measure A program. So since this is funds to help deliver 101 HOV, this is where we're recommending the funds come from. And then also related on item 8 is the Santa Claus Bikeway project. And so we are completing the technical studies for this project, but we will need additional funds to complete environmental in order to have the project ready for design and for construction. And so we did present this to the subcommittee as well as to TTAC, and they did recommend that we allocate $200,000 in RSTP reserve funding to complete the environmental for Santa Claus Lane, and then that allow us to pursue state funding for completion of the project. So with that, the technical changes are included in the staff report on page 2 related to the $200,000 for Santa Claus Lane and the $50,000 for the Kimley Horn contract. And so attached to the staff report include the budget and OWP items as well as the contract with Kimley Horn. As with that, this concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from staff? Any public comments?
No public comment.
Thank you. A motion would be in order to move the recommendations on A, B, and C.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? So carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8, Santa Claus Lane Project. 8A, approve and authorize the use of $200,000 in funding from the Highway 101 Reserve from the Regional Surface Transportation Program funds for this work. 8B, approve and authorize the chair of the SBCAG board to sign a second amendment to the contract with M&S Engineers to complete the project approval and environmental document phase of the project at a cost not to exceed $200,000. 8C, authorize the executive director to sign task orders in the future that are within the scope of work and budget of the agreement.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Directors, the item before you is to approve a contract amendment to M&S Engineers, who is a consultant currently working on the Santa Claus Lane Bikeway project. The consultant has, as Mr. Kachek indicated, started work via board direction earlier this summer in August when the contract was extended for a period of about approximately a year. And so they've started work again on the technical studies, and they've completed most of those, or nearly all of those, and those have been submitted to Caltrans, who's the lead agency for environmental on this project. We're working closely with them on this project with our overall goal to be to have this what they call project approval and environmental document completed by next June. That would allow us to be competitive, as we mentioned before, for either inclusion into the SB1 funding applications that we're targeting, or a future active transportation program cycle, which would commence next summer. So in order to do that, we have an aggressive schedule laid out through next June to finish up the draft environmental document and final, working with Caltrans, going through that process, working with our local partners on that project. This requires the additional funding to be to allow that work to commence and continue. We worked with the TTAC subcommittee that was mentioned as part of a previous item to discuss the overall 101 funding package, and part of that recommendation included $200,000 in RSTP funding for this project to continue and finish that work. And so the recommendation before the board today is that approve a contract amendment for M&S Engineers, and the funding that would be used for that would be for the RSTP funding. It would also would authorize the executive director to sign task orders in case they're necessary under that contract. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Director Wolf.
So the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they've done the technical studies and that this $200,000 is for the actual writing of the report? Or is there more technical work that needs to be done? And just frankly, that just seems like a lot of money, an additional $200,000 for an amendment. So if you could just explain that.
Yeah, so certainly. So they need to finish up some of the technical studies and write the environmental document. They also have to prepare the parallel engineering document, which is called a draft project report, conduct a public process with our local agency partners. Remember, Caltrans is the lead agency, so we're following the process that they laid out, and so you need to have the draft project report done at the same time as the draft environmental document, then receive public comments, do the final document for both, and conclude that process. And so the cost is for all that work.
Thank you for that. And this is an up to amount?
Yes.
And who's monitoring the contract?
SBCAG is the implementing agency, so we're managing the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, I have one.
Supervisor.
What was the original contract for?
The original contract was to take, we used $100,000 in a Measure A pet and bike grant, and $195,000.
I'm not talking about the amounts. I mean,
Yeah.
what was their
I was gonna get there.
to-do list?
The to-do list was to get to an administrative draft project report, which is kind of the working document to circulate through Caltrans, prepare all the environmental field work and studies. Those had to be updated because honestly, time had lapsed for a couple years before, until when work was last completed. So those had to be refreshed. And so we're actually doing some additional work to just make those up to date.
So we didn't get a complete, I mean, that was not even contemplated when we started.
That was the amount of money we had available, so we found a deliverable that we could meet at that time, which was a admin draft project report and an admin draft environmental document for internal review.
Okay, thank you. I think what we need is a policy that we don't go out to maybe we just bring it back to the board and see if we can adopt a policy or consider a policy that says that we don't go out in partials, because it's inefficient when we go out in partials, and then it can become, disjointed, because you may not have enough money to continue on with the thing for several years, and then all the money that you did put into it earlier you wasted because it's now stale and you got to go do it again. So that's kind of, it's just bad policy to be doing that. So I think that we should bring that back as soon as possible.
Any other questions of staff? Any public comments?
We have no public comment.
Thank you. This item requires a vote on items, staff recommendations A, B, and C.
So moved. Second.
Motion's made and second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? So carried. Madam Clerk.
Item 9, emerging technologies. Receive a presentation on emerging technologies in transportation.
Good morning, Chair and Directors. I'm Mike Becker of staff. Today I'm going to offer a presentation on emerging technologies in transportation. The presentation is not meant to be all-encompassing. Rather, I just want to give you a taste of what the future might look like. For one thing, we know the future will not look like the past. Like to say SBCAG is not an expert on the future of mobility. We're trying to stay on top of emerging trends, and that by no means makes us the expert. The presentation will provide some examples of where we might be going, and then I will highlight actual advances that lead towards that end. There are a variety of scenarios on the future of transportation, and I've reviewed many. I would like to offer you some thoughts from the most aggressive scenario that I've come across. I'm not endorsing this scenario, and I'm not asking you to endorse it either. Reality will likely fall somewhere between where we are today and where what I'm about to highlight conveys. The scenario that highlights this aggressive scenario is Rethink X. Rethink X is one of many scenarios trying to grasp coming changes. Again, this is the most aggressive. Most scenarios are not so aggressive. Simply highlights one end of the spectrum. And to paraphrase from the scenario, we are on the cusp of the fastest, deepest, most consequential disruptions of transportation in history. By 2030, 95% of U.S. passenger miles traveled will be served by on-demand autonomous electric vehicles owned by fleets. And to further paraphrase, the disruption will be driven by economics. Using transport as a service, the average American family will save $5,600 per year in transportation costs. And then I have a few points from the scenario. The scenario says that this transformation will start in cities and radiate outwards, which is not to be unexpected. It's driven by economics. They claim the cost of operating and maintaining a paid-off vehicle is about 34 cents a mile compared to using an autonomous electric shared vehicle will be about 16 cents a mile, and similarly about 5 cents a mile for autonomous electric shuttle service, similar to what transit might offer. And they claim that, or they estimate by 2030 that 95% of the vehicles on the road will be autonomous and electric. Passenger miles will vastly increase due to new access for the elderly, disabled, poor, young, and also price elasticity. The vehicle fleet will be reduced due to people sharing vehicles or transportation becoming a service, and safety will greatly be improved. And again, this is the most aggressive. I'm just trying to highlight one end of the spectrum. There are numerous other scenarios that are not nearly as aggressive. I'm going to touch on 3 topics today: electrification of transportation, autonomous vehicles, and then finally the shared economy. The first is electrification. And it's not just Tesla. In 2017, there are 13 different models on the US market that are plug-in electric. Nearly all vehicle manufacturers either currently offer a battery electric vehicle or are planning to in the coming years. Soon, Tesla's Gigafactory will be more than twice the size of the second largest building by floor area in the US, and it's going to be used to manufacture batteries and largely for electrifying the vehicle fleet. The graph above on the screen shows the growth of electric vehicles in the US. We're in the coming maybe 2 years, we'll be about 1 million vehicles. This only includes vehicles that are plugged in. It doesn't include the Priuses that you see running around town. For reference, though, the the U.S. vehicle light-duty fleet is about 183 million vehicles. So it's for the electric vehicle, the plug-in electric vehicles, it's still a small amount, but the rate of growth is impressive. And if you graph the price of lithium-ion battery capacity in kilowatt hours versus cost, you have essentially an inverse of what you're seeing on the screen. In 2012, 1 kilowatt hour of storage cost about $400. It's now about $150 and has now bottomed out. And that equates to, if you bought an early Tesla, the battery pack was about $35,000. And for a Tesla being manufactured today, that same battery pack would be about $13,000. It's a huge decrease in the cost of battery storage capacity. And then some recent headlines I just wanted to show. This summer, we heard Volvo said by 2019, they will only offer either hybrid electric or full electric vehicles. Also this summer, France was first, and the UK and China stayed the same. By 2040, they're going to ban the sale of gas and diesel vehicles. India stayed the same, but by 2030. And then the big one is just recent, is General Motors said that they're going all electric. By 2023, they'd have 18 EV vehicles on the road, electric vehicles, and I believe there was also a handful of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as part of that. They didn't say when they were going to phase out the internal combustion engines. However, they stated that they will make that transition.
And they own Chevrolet, so that's GM and
Yes.
Chevrolet.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Again, heavy-duty vehicles aren't being left out of this either. MTD, right here in Santa Barbara, has been operating electric shuttle buses since 1991. They currently have a fleet of 14 electric vehicles. They've ordered 14 more 30-foot electric buses to replace that fleet. The first one recently arrived. MTD is also planning to purchase 4 40-foot electric buses for use on its regular routes as a trial basis. LA Metro and Los Angeles recently ordered 95 electric buses and has a goal of having an entirely electric bus fleet by 2030, which is currently 2,200 buses. Tesla is expected to announce an electric semi-truck, and as part of GM's announcement earlier this month, they talked about hydrogen fuel cell heavy-duty vehicles. And the second of the 2 topics, we had a little bit of technical difficulty this morning, so Andrew's going to bring up a video that will play while I turn the volume down. Can you turn the volume off? Okay, Andrew. Okay, in September, the US DOT released updated guidelines for automated driving systems. The updated guidelines decrease the federal government's role in the oversight and testing in the oversight of the testing and development of autonomous vehicles, essentially enabling more speedy development and deployment. There are 6 defined levels of autonomy, 0 through 5. Level 0 is a vehicle without any autonomous features, and you can think of your childhood family car. Level 5 is a vehicle that you could operate, or that can operate without a human, and may or may not even have a steering wheel or pedals. You could take a nap or read a book in a level 4 vehicle. The video you're watching shows level 3. Level 2 is the highest that you will currently see available for sale. Numerous steps in automation have been realized. And I would argue the first step is cruise control. Though it's been around for a while, it partially automates the driving experience. We've also seen the introduction of adaptive cruise control in 2000, which is now fairly common on all high-end cars. In 2015, we started seeing lane keeping assist, which prevents a driver from drifting out of a lane. If you put the lane keeping assist and adaptive cruise control together, you have the beginnings of a hands-off experience, at least in highway conditions. We've also seen self-parking features, vehicle summoning, self-lane changing, and others. And I'd like to note all of these individual technologies that we are seeing are steps in developing autonomous vehicles. And the manufacturers are saying GM claims they'll be the first mass producer of autonomous vehicles. Ford claims it'll have a fully autonomous vehicle level 5 with no steering wheel or pedals by 2021. Daimler Freightliner currently has an autonomous semi-truck being tested in the state of Nevada. And Tesla predicts level 5 autonomy by 2019 or 2020. Now, I'm sorry to cut off the video now. Just know that his feet never leave the floor and his hands never leave his lap. So back to the slideshow, please. Okay. Okay, and the last of the three topics, the shared economy. And say, if you remember the times that you told your kids to share, whether they've listened or they're listening now. In this section, I'm going to touch on bike share, car share, and transportation network companies. Bike share systems are emerging technology making their presence known across the U.S. The systems provide low-cost and one-way transportation options. They're beneficial for mid-distance trips that may be a bit too long to walk or too short to consider driving, transit, or another mode. They also enhance the transit system by helping to solve the ever-present first and last mile connectivity issue. Many of the systems in the U.S. are similar to the Los Angeles system shown in the photo. However, over the last year, many of the systems are trending towards either being partially or entirely dockless. And that means that the bikes essentially lock to themselves. They don't need kiosk areas like this. A user might pay between $50 and $150 a year for unlimited trips up to, say, 30 minutes per trip, and casual users might pay $1 for a half hour. Pricing structures are typically fashioned to prevent long-term use. The first modern bike share systems in the U.S. were launched in 2010. By the end of 2010, there were 1,600 bikes being shared by those four systems. By 2016, there were 55 systems sharing a total of 42,000 bikes and being used about 28 million times. The average annual growth of number of bike share bikes in the U.S. is an impressive 72%. UCSB is in the last stages of selecting a vendor for the region's first bike share system. You can also share cars. Car share companies began to proliferate in the early 2000s. Just recently, car share came to Santa Barbara, and they also have a presence on UCSB. Car sharing is useful for people who might be able to walk to work, but occasionally need a car to run errands. And the cost of sharing a car for those people would be less than it is of owning and maintaining their own car. There's a variety of other technologies coming through smartphone apps, peer-to-peer car sharing, ride matching and ride sharing. And last year I came across an interesting company that uses Tesla Model X's van pull vehicle, similar to how we operate van pulls, to bring people from the interior LA to downtown LA. During the day in downtown LA, the vehicles are fleet vehicles for various companies. And on the nights and weekends, they are car share vehicles back in Riverside County. So they're being used almost nonstop. And then the final part of the shared is transportation network companies. It can be typified by the two major players, Uber and Lyft. Uber is much larger than Lyft, about 8 times so I wanted to give a few statistics on Uber. Since its inception in 2009, it has grown from serving San Francisco to operating in 83 countries. In 2016, Uber provided 2 billion trips worldwide. It now provides about 40 million rides per month in the US. A recent survey of TNC users in the Bay Area found 22% would have taken transit if the TNC weren't available, and 19% would have driven alone, which TNCs may be partially responsible for the recent downturn in transit ridership. Parking is the primary beneficiary for people who would have otherwise driven alone. The same survey found that 20% of the vehicles on the streets of San Francisco during the peak hours are TNCs. 20% is just a huge amount of vehicles. And I think around here, if you ever find yourself on State Street on Friday or Saturday evening, it's probably equally as high, if not higher. There are cross benefits with transit that we're currently seeing. Recently, the Livermore-Amador Valley Transit Authority in the Bay Area had partnered with a transportation network company to provide subsidized service on in a corridor that's not efficient for full-fledged transit service. And also the city of Laguna Beach has partnered with Uber, or I believe it's Uber, maybe Lyft, to partially take over their Dow ride service. And I understand that the city of Solvang recently approved the same thing, that the city and the county is going to be working with a private operator to partially take over their Dow ride operations. And some closing thoughts. Segways and smartphones. There was a lot of smart people when Segways came out that said we would never walk again. And also there was a lot of smart people when smartphones came out that said nobody's ever going to want to buy one. So where's this going? I don't know. We know that things are going to change. We don't know the degree they're going to change or when they're going to change. A lot of people have a lot of opinions, but I can't tell you. Each of these three things are not in isolation. The future is likely to be a mix of all three, electric, autonomous, and shared. Economics does appears to have taken hold. There's a lot of private money, especially in developing autonomous vehicles. A lot of money, private money in manufacturing batteries for electrifying the auto fleet. And there are externalities that exist that we don't know what happens when autonomous vehicles threaten the jobs of millions of people. Is the political pressure is going to be not allow for this to happen? We don't know. There's a lot of things that can influence the timeline of implementation of any of this, but that's what I have. I'd be happy to take any questions, though, like I said, I'm not an expert. I try and stay on top of it, and it's a difficult thing to do. It's constantly evolving.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions of staff? We do have a request for a public speaker. Cameron Gray.
Good morning, Chair Bennett and board members. My name is Cameron Gray. I'm speaking on behalf of Community Environmental Council. And I want to start by thanking Mr. Becker for an excellent presentation today. I think he did a phenomenal job highlighting some of the scenarios that we're looking at in the future. And you might be asking yourself, what a guy who represents an environmental nonprofit is doing up here talking about technology change. Well, we see at Community Environmental Council a real compelling need for our region to prepare for these transformative shifts in transportation. We believe that a proactive and forward-looking approach will empower our communities to leverage these changes in transportation to derive the greatest social, economic, and environmental benefit. The alternative of doing nothing and leaving our region unprepared would put our communities and local economies at the mercy of what most experts agree are going to be hugely transformative changes in the way we move and the way our economies move. So I think Mr. Becker did a really good job of highlighting that we can't know exactly what these changes are going to look like. We're not in the business at Community Environmental Council of predicting details like whether autonomous vehicles are going to be at a 90% ownership rate or a 60% ownership rate in 10 years. But what we can know is that these changes are coming, and that's enough, we believe, to begin having some local discussion and thought leadership around what we can do to prepare. So importantly, I mean, the companies like Google, Apple, Uber, they're all investing a ton of money, and there's a reason that Ford recently rebranded from an automobile manufacturer to a quote-unquote mobility company. They see the opportunity here, and I think that that's what I really want to highlight today is that while these are challenging changes and potentially disruptive changes, there are very real opportunities that if we're willing to come to the table early and start talking about things we can do, identifying who are the winners and losers, who's going to need help? Are bus drivers going to be out of work in our community? What can we do to help them transition into new jobs that are going to support these changes? Those are the types of conversations that I would invite us to start thinking about together. And I know that other nonprofit organizations in our community, such as the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation and the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, are very ready and willing to participate in these dialogues. And we've even had discussions about holding forums, bringing people from bigger cities who've done some groundwork around thinking through what preparation can look like, bring those people to our communities and really kind of catalyze some discussion. So again, I want to thank Mr. Becker, and thank you very much for considering our comments today.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Item 10.
Hang on a second. You got to look at the little thing with the lights in front of it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. You know, I would encourage us to be a little more slow moving on these kind of things, because although we think we know everything, I guess some of us think we know everything, and there's going to be winners and losers, that really, and then we decide who we're going to help. And you know, I think, you know, there's Instagram and there's Facebook and there's Snap and there's others, and you know, the market is in the process of sorting out who's going to wind up on top of that and who's going to be in the dustbin of history. And it takes a while for the market to figure these things out. And the market will sort it out. Some of those technologies are going to expand, and some of them are going to contract, and some disruptor is going to come in and give you something that you didn't even see coming, which has happened recently and will continue to happen. And you know, sometimes I feel like some of the theories of the other side are predicated on the idea that everything that is knowable is known. And I think we have to be really careful that we don't assume that, because we know from recent past history and even ancient past history that we don't know everything. Somebody's going to come up with something that we never considered. And in fact, nobody else on the planet ever considered. There's going to be technologies that are breakthroughs that, and you know, 2 years from now, all this stuff may be irrelevant. You may be literally floating around like the Jetsons. You don't know. So I think we should just take a breath here when we think we can predict these things and help the people that we decide need help and, you know, may lose, and that's maybe why we want to help them, or maybe we feel like they're going to be the winner, and so we want to help them. And I think that's really a bad idea. You know, we have such a shortage of government money now. We have so many other pressing needs that are really physical needs that have to be taken care of, that we should really be refraining from any type of government intervention in these processes, because this is a process that's going to happen regardless of our input. And I think any attempts to help a winner or a loser would be futile in any event. And we have just real world problems that need to be solved, and I think we should focus on them.
Director Williams.
I just flipped my light on knowing that some of this stuff might come up. You know, I want to partially agree and partially disagree with my colleague. Agree that there are unknown factors. I personally think some of that scenario was a little rosier than is likely. People tend to use their old technology for you know, decade or two longer in some cases. But I also think that the unknowns shouldn't stop us from making rational choices when we know a lot of things today. We know today that the cheapest car to drive on the road is an electric car. If you include your fuel costs, right? And so, you know, that's something we know right now. And so if we're looking at scalable solutions that both knock down our pollution impacts, and mind you, this is a lot more than just knocking down GHGs. This is knocking down, you know that in this county, if you live within 300 feet of a freeway or a highway or a major thoroughfare, your chances of a respiratory disease is much higher. Your chances of living a shorter time is much higher. And, you know, that's a terrible thing, even apart from GHGs, to acknowledge. That's terrible knowledge for me as a father, to know the only place that I can afford is someplace where I probably am sentencing my daughter to health problems in the future. That sucks. That sucks for a lot of people in this county. And both the best solution for that and an economic, rational decision is to move towards more electric cars and more electric car infrastructure. I also think it's a, you know, part of our economic development. If there's even partial shift this way, more and more people will make a lot of their shopping decisions based on where they can also fuel for a cheap amount or with convenience. And a lot of cities are obviously making that choice and putting in electric car charging infrastructure. And, you know, the last thing is, you know, when Jim Richardson and my Republican mother from Paso Robles buy electric cars, this may not just be for us crazy green environmentalists, you know.
I still have my Cadillac. I'm not going to give up my Cadillac.
Excuse me. We're going to have Joan speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a famous set of photographs looking at Park Avenue in New York City, and it shows all horses and one car. 13 years later, it's all cars and one horse. Our job as leaders is to anticipate what's going to happen in the future and begin to think about what the potential consequences would be and how we best prepare for that future. That's a far different thing than trying to favor one company or one market over another, but I think we would be highly irresponsible not to begin looking at this. I have a daughter who lives in San Francisco, and that future is already there. There are scooters that you just get on and drive and park wherever you want to, and you've got your card to do it. Same with cars. They're the Zip cars. The autonomous driving cars are coming. The electrical cars are not only cheaper to operate with electrical energy, but they have far fewer moving parts. We're on the horizon of a 1,000,000-mile car, so they're highly reliable, and I think everything that I've read, we're moving in this direction. How fast and what the repercussions are and how well prepared we are is a wholly another question. But to close our eyes and say we're not even going to discuss it when our job is to provide the infrastructure that supports it seems to me not a direction I'm willing to consider. Thank you.
Director Adams.
Well, first of all, you know, Amazon, everybody's starting to get groceries from, you know, delivery. So if you make somebody put a charging station in front of a storefront, you know, storefronts may be becoming obsolete. We don't know. You know, in 10 years, there may not be very many stores around. So, you know, and you know, closing your eyes and not even discussing something is different than letting the market sort it out and not trying to manipulate the outcome and using public money to manipulate the outcome, which is what I'm against. I'm not against electric cars or 1,000,000-mile cars or anything like that. I think that's great. I'll probably get one when they actually prove that it works. You know, I'm not an early adopter of these things because I tend to be a little bit cynical about, yes. I know that comes as a shock to you, Janet. But I want somebody else to drive it 1,000,000 miles first, and then I'll buy one, you know? So, you know, once Janet gets 1,000,000 miles on hers, then I'll buy one. But, you know, that's the thing.
Thank you. Anybody else? See no more lights. Excuse me.
I'm very interested in the CEC proposal of workshops and beginning to think further about what this would mean, and I'd be very excited to participate or see who in the county or on SBCAG board would like to participate, because I mean, UCSB is already, as we heard, putting in the bike program, and how they're going to get from UCSB here to Santa Barbara, you know, safely is a key issue. So I would love to participate in ongoing discussions. It doesn't mean we're making any decisions, but it means that we are framing possible decisions for the future.
Okay. Excuse me, Director Richardson.
I just wanted to add that the electrification of the transportation looks like a rosy projection, and I do like my electric car, but something that enters my mind is the electrical infrastructure going to be capable of providing power to all these electric cars by 2020 or 2030? It's going to require an extraordinary investment by the power companies to ensure that. Namely, local transformers around your neighborhood may not be able to take that load of all the cars that are being charged in the neighborhood. So it's something to consider, is to encourage the power companies to step up to the plate and provide that power without an undue expense to the homeowners.
Thank you. Director Williams.
This has definitely been Mr. Richardson's question has been a big topic of debate in the state legislature for the last couple of years, and the Public Utilities Commission. And actually, the reality is that it's being viewed more as an opportunity, because the high amount of renewables that we have now means that there is peak periods where we have a lot more energy than we need on the grid. And so these energy companies are really looking at investing a lot more in electric car infrastructure, not because that's their primary revenue model, but because they want to control how big the pipe is at a certain time of day. They want to be able to have a bigger pipe to the electric cars when they have a lot of excess energy, and shrink that pipe when they don't, so that essentially it becomes dispatchable, is the term in energy use. And so I think that's one of the exciting things. I'd also be happy to participate in CEC's workshops or anything like that. But I think there's great opportunities in this, but Mr. Richardson points out an issue. It doesn't mean infrastructure investment.
Thank you. Don't see any more comments, Madam Clerk.
Item 10, 1-minute reports. Board members and alternates are invited to provide updates on activities in their districts or cities.
Anyone wish to comment on this item? Don't see a correction.
I just wanted to mention that Valley Gardens in the unincorporated county near Solvang is going to be having 3 phases of moving manufactured homes from Santa Rosa Road on 246 to the Valley Gardens, which is across from the high school. And this will start the first phase. They'll have 27 homes altogether. The first 9 will come November 3rd. And so they have to work with Caltrans and Highway Patrol and others to get this going, but that's the first phase of it. So just wanted to announce that and thank Caltrans for all the help getting these new workforce housing opportunities situated in Solvang. Thank you.
Any other comment, Director Richardson?
I keep hating to bring this up, but I'm really concerned about the intersection of Highway 101 and 246 in Buellton. If that is going forward with the study to improve that intersection, And so I'm going to keep bringing it up until we see some movement in that area. And also, I want to remind us of the Refugio 246 intersection across from the high school, if that process is still underway for safety improvements. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll just piggyback on that one. Our Public Works Director is contacting her contacts at Caltrans, and we're hoping to submit some plans so that we can work together to get that taken care of. So appreciate the cooperation.
I spoke with the Caltrans representative after our meeting last time, and one thing that she proposed that I think is very exciting is to look at the 246, 154 intersection west on both of those roads and do a regional plan, particularly in light of increased traffic now on 154 commuters, as well as the impacts from the casino. So instead of doing it piecemeal, we would look at the whole and not just a signal here or a roundabout there, but try to understand what it looks like. So I hope to work with Caltrans on that.
Is that a project that's in motion? I think it's a terrific idea.
It's a regional study.
It's a regional study that's being, is it just an idea right now, or is it something that's starting to roll?
So my understanding is that it's a concept for a study. I'm not certain exactly what the status of that is. John Olenek, who's actually sitting next to me, who's the local government and tribal liaison, may have additional information. Do you have anything you want to speak to on that in terms of status?
Right. The concept you mentioned is something you talked about with our deputy, Eileen Lowe, last time. And so Eileen and I talked about it, and hopefully after the meeting today, I was going to make contact and we could talk a little more and see what opportunities there are for the future through partnership planning grants, sustainable community type grants that involve all the key stakeholders in the region. So you're right, we do want to take a corridor view of the entire area as opposed to just trying to chase after spot locations. So yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any more comments there. Moving along, Madam Clerk.
Item 11, Executive Director's Report.
Mr. Chairperson, members of the board, just 4 quick things. So first of all, I want to thank the staff, the member agency staff, for working with us, with SBCAG staff, on the 101 funding strategy that you heard all about today. Getting the team together and developing the strategy is just going to make our application and our application stronger as we go to the state, and having that camaraderie really does help. Second, I want to give a little plug to our Tiger grant that we just submitted this past Monday, and our infra grant that we're going to submit later this month, if not next month, because Michael Morris from FHWA is in the audience, and I just need to give a plug to that grant application that we're submitting to the feds. Yesterday, the CTC adopted the Alternative Transportation Program, the grants that we submitted a few months ago, and all 4 projects received the funding, and especially I'm proud of Guadalupe. They got their project fully funded, so they're going to move forward on that. And last but not least, we have a job announcement that's up. It's for a senior planner in our programming department. Applications are due November 3rd. So with that, that's my report, and I'll answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of our director? Okay. Madam Clerk.
Item 12, Caltrans District Director's Report.
I need to turn on the mic. Chair Bennett and directors. Again, Scott Eads representing Tim Gubbins today. I have a few announcements for you, and then I actually have some slides to show kind of a fun, good news story in terms of a project that we just completed that I'll talk about, provided the chair is comfortable with me doing so.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay on the time. Go ahead.
Great. Okay. So first, as we've talked about today, SBCAG staff mentioned the fact that SB1 is a real game changer, and it's really a new paradigm for funding transportation. And so some of the things I have to talk about are upcoming project grants. That are really, many of these are driven by SB1. There's a call for projects for the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant, which fits in with the corridor study we just talked about. That's the type of thing that program can be about. It's actually due tomorrow, and that's something that's available for local jurisdictions as well as SBCAG, and I know that SBCAG is something that they've been working on that will be submitted if it hasn't already. And another one is the Cal STA, State Transportation Authority, has a transit and intercity rail capital improvement project funding source, as well as a state rail assistance program funding source, and those are due January 12th. And there's a plethora of other funding grants that I'm not going to go into, many which you've just heard about today through Sarkis. I also want to announce the release of the California State Rail Plan. That was recently released. It's open for public comment until December 11th. There's a series of public workshops that are happening statewide. The first occurred in San Luis Obispo at the train station, actually, on October 14th. And then there's a series of others in Fresno, Oakland, and other locations that are upcoming. I also wanted to mention, so that's it for funding grants that are upcoming. There's many more, and certainly we'll be working with the SBCAG very closely on these upcoming funding grants related to the 101 corridor. Wanted to also mention something that's been happening up in the northern part of the districts, and that is that you're probably aware of the fact that this winter we had some major events, storm events that drove some major changes that we've needed to respond to. And one was a bridge that a landslide actually occurred underneath the bridge structure at the Pfeiffer Canyon Bridge, and it took out the center pier, and the bridge had a catastrophic failure, and it needed to come down. And so literally between the time we learned about that until just last week, we were able to demo the bridge, design a new bridge, secure permits, initiate an emergency contract, which led to the demo and the subsequent work, and then construct the bridge. And we had a grand opening, ribbon cutting last Friday, and it was pretty amazing because the community of Big Sur was completely isolated for that entire time, because on the other end of Big Sur, we had what's called the mudslide, and that added about, I think, 52 acres of new coastline. So we actually are gaining coastline in some areas. And we're working on that. We're looking at opening that in the summer of next year. It's just the size and scope of the change there is requiring massive amount of equipment. But nonetheless, that's moving forward, and it's a really important step forward that we're able to provide the access back to the community of Big Sur. Next thing I wanted to mention is an award, the Excellent in Transportation Award, which is a statewide category where they look at projects that are submitted statewide, and it's a Caltrans award that selects the best of those for recognition. For SBCAG that I'll mention today is the Santa Barbara Ventura 101 HOV project, which we call Phase 2. Received an award for installation of the new HOV lanes and the bike path that was associated with that project. It was a unique project in that it was a unique situation where we actually had bicyclists riding on 101, on the shoulders of 101 with 60, 70 mile an hour traffic. And so that project, and that occurred because of the fact that there were simply no alternatives for bicycle travel going down through Muscle Shoals, between the county line and Muscle Shoals. So that project removed the bike lanes on 101 and created a new Class 1 bike lane or bike path between approximately Muscle Shoals up to the county line. It also installed new HOV lanes, about 6 miles of new HOV lanes. So anyhow, I have a plaque here, which I'll hand off, which is the Excellence in Transportation Award to SBCAG for their participation in that project. And then also of note, and Fred does not know about this, he was named as a contributor to that project team that was noted and also received an award of recognition. Okay, and the last thing I have is a series of photos, really, that I'd just like to tell the story of the Castillo Street undercrossing repair. Is there a clicker I can use?
Greg's over there.
Great. Okay, so this is something that happened this summer. It's been a situation that's been evolving for a while. It's at the Castillo Street interchange in Santa Barbara. The little arrow there shows the location. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, where this is. this particular undercrossing connects downtown with the Santa Barbara City College, the Stearns Wharf, all the beach areas along Cabrillo, and City College. And so it's, I already said City College. So it's an important connector between the downtown and other areas of the city of Santa Barbara. The problem that we've had there is, well, first of all, this is the location. You're looking down on it. It goes not only underneath 101, but also under the UP railroad tracks, as you can see there. The situation and the problem that we've had there for many years is we've had seepage that's coming up from underneath the concrete section. This undercrossing was constructed in 1963. It's actually underneath the water table, so it's what we call a boat section, and that there's hydraulic pressure pushing up constantly. In about 1971, which is around the time of the Silomar earthquake, so we're not totally sure that that was what caused the situation, but around the same time as the earthquake, we started to see the seepage. And there's been many attempts to try to address it over the years. The most recent was the installation of these tiles, or the pavers that you see there. Unfortunately, the project continued to be a recurrent problem. And early this year, actually, the City of Santa Barbara and the Bicycle Coalition brought to our attention that this is becoming an issue in terms of bicycle safety. People are slipping on this constant wet condition, and it's causing problems. And so with that, there's just another photo showing the condition there. With that, we looked at what was occurring in other areas. We'd been monitoring a project in I-5 in the community of Sacramento, the city of Sacramento. There's a section of I-5 that has what's called a floating slab. And I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. But it's basically an elevated riding surface above a seal slab with a continuous drainage pathway underneath. So it allows for the water to go underneath the driving surface. I'll show you some more slides here in just a second. So this is the situation that they have in I-5. Downtown Sacramento. It's been working, it's been functioning since 2008, and it's continued to solve the problem there. So it appears to be a good long-term solution that we felt was analogous and we can implement here. So we went forward with a design concept that, based on the unique situations we have here, provided a surface for water to flow underneath in some areas, and then modifying and adding a continuous slab in other areas. What you can see here with the light blue on the screen there is that there's a segment underneath the structural concrete surface on top, that this is a new surface, and water is allowed to flow under its current flow patterns and reach the edge drains that exist now, and then go into the pump station that pumps the water out as it occurs. So through a lot of coordination with the City of Santa Barbara and the Bicycle Coalition on what is if this is the best solution and this is the reality that we need to do this, what's the best way to make this happen? There was discussion on how best to do that, and we ended up with the conclusion that the preferred time is over the summer when City College is out. It should diminish the traffic needs here. It's not ideal, but nonetheless, we're going to do a full closure, and that seems to be the best way to get this done. Let's go ahead and do it. So we had a closure window of June 19th to August 31st. We pulled up all the pavers, and then began an intensive process of installing a heck of a lot of rebar. There was about 79,000 pounds, I'm sorry, it was 95,000 pounds of rebar that we installed. And then this slotted drain conveys the water. So this is what we use in this application. It was this slotted drain, or this drain application that we pour the concrete over top that allows the water to be conveyed. Here you see some drilling in the underlying concrete surface to put in the rebar. Those were all bonded in with epoxy. And then a lot of rebar went in, and then you can see the fabric here that conveys the water. Just more pictures of it being installed. And then ultimately, we had an intensive rebar where it's all tied together in preparation for installing the final concrete overlay. So then the concrete pour occurred on July 21st. As you can see here, it's a monolithic pour, so it all happened at once. And so everyone was staged. We began at midnight, and it ended at around 9 a.m. And it was important that it all be done at once so that there was no seams in the concrete, so that we didn't have opportunities for water to try to come up anymore with the hydraulic pressure. So they were able to accomplish this. They had 4 pump trucks with like an 80-foot reach. They were stationed on the ramps and on Castillo Street. It was really an impressive operation. They also increased the height of the sidewalk in some areas where the additional lift encroached into what would have been the height of the sidewalk. Here you can see the concrete being poured. And then here what you see is a machine that allows the concrete to be surfaced. And we were able to, with this machine, trying to remember the name of it here. Sorry? That's not what they were calling it, but yes. Anyhow, basically you can see that it runs on rails. And not only was it able to provide a flat surface, but it also was able to provide a crown for drainage as part of the project along Castillo. Those are what it runs on there. Uh-oh, missing slide. Okay, and here it's becoming daylight. This is getting close to the early hours of the morning, and you can see the work is continuing. And then here it shows it finished. And what you see in this white area here is a curing compound that was put on at the last. Here's the curing compound being applied. And then there was a long wait. This was structural concrete. It was really important that it cure to the appropriate time. We didn't want to have any opportunities for compromising the structural integrity of this new installation. And so we waited for 28 days. And then at the last moments, we delineated the pavement and then opened it early. It was opened a couple weeks early, and this was before the City College began classes again. So we were able to accomplish that and had a grand opening or reopening of the interchange on the 18th of August. And it's still functioning well today. So we're hopeful that this is a long-term solution. We've been hopeful in the past, but based on the success of what we've seen in I-5, we think that this is the right solution here, and it's certainly far, far, far cheaper than it would have been to reconstruct the interchange, which was really probably the only other option that we were aware of. So kudos to Caltrans Construction and Caltrans Maintenance Design for putting together design and making this happen. And thanks for the cooperation from the city and your patience in allowing it to cure as well.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll just say I was, and many of the Board of Old Spanish Days was freaking out about horses and the Fiesta Parade, which happened in the middle of this, and we found a alternate route, which was actually a mile longer for the horses, but it worked just fine, and that was also in coordination with Caltrans because we had to close off the Garden Street off-ramp, on-ramp during the time of the parade, so there were not cars and carriages. I was on the carriage all the way because you had to get back to the carriage station, and but it worked out. I don't want to use that route again, so let's hope this works. And but that was also an added part of the coordination that needed to happen. So thank you for that.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you for that report. That's really an amazing fix. I'm just wondering if there's any net increase in the elevation of the road surface as a result.
Yes, there is. So there's an increase in the road surface in areas that we could accommodate it. Actually, under the railroad, we could not increase the vertical or reduce the vertical clearance. And so the areas where we had the drainage issues, we were able to put in the filter fabric and believe that that would accomplish everything we need to. In the railroad, we just weren't able to do it to the same degree. We were still able to put in a structural section there because we took out the pavers, but we weren't able to include the filter fabric in all areas. But the areas where we saw the drainage occurring, especially after we pulled off the pavers, the filter fabric appears to have covered the areas appropriately and provided the drainage needs that we needed to address. So.
Thank you. Director Richardson.
I want to compliment Caltrans. In the past several years, you've done some wonderful and exceedingly strikingly important events. The Oakland Bay Bridge, the Sepulveda Pass, the bridge on Highway 1. And the bridge on Highway 1 is important to Solvang because that's the scenic highway that bring tourists into my town. And so we're proud that how long was that bridge out?
Which one, I'm sorry, in Big Sur?
The one-on-one, yeah, that you had to repair. How long was it out?
It was 7 months.
10 months. It's
7
marvelous.
months. 7 months, yeah.
That was
very
really
fast.
something. That was very something.
It was an amazing, it was a lot of coordination with permitting agencies and the contractor, the bridge contractor. They literally designed it at the same time they were ordering steel. So it was happening concurrently. They developed some specifications and started looking for steel. It was an amazing process, yeah.
And then regarding the Castillo underpass, it looks like you built a viaduct. and then I know the mills of bureaucracy run slow, and what I'd like to do, if we could get some sort of a periodic update on this regional plan on Highway 246 between 101 and 154, it would be just to keep things on the surface, not so that it gets buried away in a file drawer someplace. So if we could have a periodic, monthly or quarterly report on the status of that, that would be wonderful.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Director Mosby.
What was the total cost of that project?
Steel?
Yes.
It was 1.5 million.
Thank you for your presentation. I think it's really helpful to, especially for all the locals around here who deal with that and have been dealing with it forever and ever and ever. So I'm optimistic it'll work as you've described. Madam Clerk, item 13.
Committee meetings.
Director Schneider.
Thank you. Very briefly, CRCC met, and SBCAG should see on a future agenda a request from them for a memorandum of understanding between CRCC and the different CAGs and COGs throughout the corridor, just to formalize more about this kind of informal relationship and the ongoing process of trying to bring the Amtrak daylight back to existence. So stay tuned.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and we'll reconvene in Santa Maria on November the 16th.
If anybody